Well, to discuss this, we have James Lewis from Washington, D.C. He's the Senior Vice President and Program Director at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He's also advised the U.S. government on national security and concerns over spying related to high-tech trade with China. Joining us from Beijing is Qinduo. He's a political analyst specializing in Chinese affairs. And completing our panel in Boston is former CIA officer Carle. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. James Lewis, let me begin with you. This guy, Ji Chaoquan, arrested. The feds seem to think that he's a spy. Do you think he's a spy?
Probably. There's a lot of them floating around the U.S.
And tell me why.
Well, for decades, really, China has had a campaign to acquire Western technology, advanced technology, and they use a combination of techniques, including human spies. So if you were to talk to sources in the U.S. intelligence community, they would tell you that Chinese spying is at a peak that we've never seen before.
Right, that's interesting, a peak that we've never seen before. Qinduo, according to a court affidavit, Ji was working at the direction of a, quote, high-level intelligence officer in China's Ministry of State Security. That was his handler, right, which handles civilian intelligence collection and is responsible for counterintelligence and foreign intelligence as well as political security. So does this seem plausible to you?
Frankly speaking, I don't know, because all the information we have been reading or hearing is from the accusation, the U.S. government side, and we don't know. We don't hear from this guy explaining his case or speaking for himself, or his lawyers speaking for himself. But anyway, let's assume he's a spy for China or for any other country. I wouldn't be surprised. China, US, Russia, big countries, France, all at some point involved in, spying activities, including industrial espionage. If you look at the CIA structure, actually, 2 out of 4, the director department over there, actually 2 of them are concerned about with, a collection of technical scientific information. So big countries is doing that, so it's not surprising.
Right. Carle, are they both doing it, the United States and China?
Well, I'm only aware of one country in the world that I think doesn't have an intelligence service. So the answer in general will, of course, be yes. In particular, as our colleagues just pointed out, for large powers, great powers, like the United States and China, and then 2 countries that have overlapping and increasingly tense relations, such as China and the United States. There have been, I believe the number is 155 or more arrests by the FBI in the last 5 to 10 years of individuals who are accused of conducting espionage for China in the United States. So tensions in the espionage world between the 2 countries have been rising for a number of years in correlation with the increasing rivalry and tensions between China and the United States.
Yeah, in a time of a trade war as well. James Lewis, the interesting thing about this particular guy is that he had the fast-track visa program through the Mavni program. So he came in on a student visa, he got his degree, then he enlisted, and you can get fast-track residency and be put on the path to citizenship if you join the armed forces. A lot of people have gone this route, and it's been very enticing for many people who have unique skills, whether they speak Mandarin or Farsi and so forth. There's been a lot of question marks about this program, and in 2016 it was actually suspended, right, because of national security concerns. Were authorities vindicated in suspending it, given that this guy might quite likely be a spy who gamed the system?
No, I think that we still benefit more from letting people in than we do from keeping them out. And particularly when you look at high-tech industries, highly skilled individuals, we have to have some way, we the United States have to have some way to bring these people in, let them work in our economy. What we've seen, though, in the past is that first-generation immigrant Chinese students and workers are more susceptible to recruitment by Chinese intelligence agencies. And so what this means is keep the program, maybe put a little more effort into counter-espionage to identify the people who will be recruited.
Glenn Carle, are we at sort of Cold War levels of espionage between the United States and China, but just replace Russia with China? Is that where we're at?
I wouldn't put it at the level of the Cold War, no, but certainly increasing rivalry. China is returning to its historic position as a global power, and the United States is not in decline, but in relative loss of hegemony. So the rivalry increases. But as Mr. Lewis and our other colleague in Beijing commented, these are the normal frictions and activities of states. I also would like to reemphasize or agree with strongly Mr. Lewis's point that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There will always be espionage and tensions and competing rivalries, but the net benefit for the United States of having a robust immigrant program
right.
Are so far outweigh the costs of finding the spies that it would be foolish to harm ourselves.
Xu, on the other side of the coin, help me understand how it went down when the New York Times broke that story last year of China dismantling a suspected CIA spy ring. And this, I mean, they really crippled it, right? This was between 2010 and 2012. Multiple reports. The New York Times said about 30 people were executed. Foreign Policy doubles that number and says it was much, much, much more. Help me understand how that went down in China and what it meant to the Chinese that they felt they dismantled a US-run spy ring.
Well, that's a spectacular story, let's say, because in general, folks on the street have little knowledge or information about what's really going on between government agencies, especially spying agencies, or spying on each other. First of all, I agree with my colleague, that's a normal thing. Secondly, of course, dismantling a spy network within China like that is something, let's say, that's something, let me call it achievement for the Chinese side, through whatever hard work they have done. I would say if this happened in the United States or in Russia, that's also normal. We are spying against each other at the same time. We are trying to protect ourselves from being spied on. This is just two sides of this effort of spying, let's say.
Glenn Carle, what was the lesson for the United States after the Chinese took out that program pretty brutally?
Well, we have no illusions about the Chinese counterintelligence authorities and legal system being kind-hearted, really, with regard to people it catches or accuses of espionage. The lesson is that is not a new one. You always need to have a rigorous and ceaseless counterintelligence effort, so that your own efforts are not penetrated, be it your service or your actions abroad. It was a catastrophe apparently for the United States intelligence community, and you don't let doubts go unpursued. That's all you can do.
James, who has greater capability between the United States and China when it comes to espionage?
Right now, I'd still have to say the U.S. The Chinese have had spectacular successes really over the last decade or two, and a lot of it involves cyber espionage. But the U.S. capabilities, both in technical acquisition, still outpace China. They're closing fast. On the human intelligence side, I think the issue is there's more Chinese who are eager to get out of China than there are Americans who are eager to get in, and that's just going to give you a recruitment advantage. So overall, advantage to the U.S., but the gap is narrowing.
Right. And Xu, let me fold in some news from May when France had detained two former foreign intelligence agents on suspicion of spying for China. These were French nationals on suspicion of spying for China. Let's just assume that's true. Assume that, that happened, right? What does that say about China's reach and its adaptability globally?
Well, frankly speaking, I know very little about that. The case against the case on spying the French. I'm not sure if that's the true case and what they are looking for from the French, let's say. And spying, there are different kinds of types of spying, let's say. Some for industrial information. That's more common, let's say, even between companies. They want to steal some information from their opponents. So that's normal. Some in terms, it's related to national security, strategic plans or information of that nature. That's also quite normal between big powers. But France is not, let's say, opponent or potential rivalry, a rival of China. No, I would be surprised if that's a true case.
Glenn, big picture, how much has the game changed? I mean, I'm assuming poison-tipped umbrellas never existed in the first place, but as was mentioned, cyber spying, cyber espionage, and so forth, and hacking and that type of thing. Is that front and center when it comes to espionage these days? And are intelligence agencies playing catch-up with new stuff that we struggle really to understand?
Oh, well, I think I'll differ with you a little bit here. Poison-tipped umbrellas have always existed in one form or
We've heard it from the CIA, so it's true.
If you can think of a technique, then probably it will be used. You know, Murphy's Law, if something can go wrong, it will. And if a technique or a technology can be used in one way or another, it will. What's new in the game is that China is emerging from a century of struggle and internal problems, and now for the first time in history, not just the largest and becoming possibly the most powerful country in the world by certain measures, but is actively playing a global role and not just, frankly, a regional one. That's what's different. The interests and clashes of states are not different. The rivalries between the U.S., which has been the arbiter in the Pacific since World War II, and China, which is now extending its influence, is new in the post-war or ex-post-war world, and that's the only change. Otherwise, intelligence services will continue to pursue their country's national interests aggressively.
Right. James, what would it take for either side to do in order to unravel the political relationship or to cause real mayhem and to have the two on high alert? At what level of espionage are we talking about that becoming a reality?
It's so far as my colleagues have said, the contest between the U.S. and China has been fairly traditional, focused on the Chinese side on military and technology, on the U.S. side on politics and military secrets. So I don't think there's much risk there. This would be a worsening of tensions in the relationship if something happened outside of espionage. Espionage is a tool. It's not usually the driver. The Russians, yes, in 2016 had some very exciting moments, but I think for the U.S. and China, it's the worsening political relationship that will drive this.
Okay. James Lewis, Qinduo, and Glenn Carle, it's been good to talk to all of you. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers.